The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 15th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus called the crowd to him and said to them, "Listen and understand. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but it is what comes out of the mouth that defiles." Then the disciples approached and said to him, "Do you know that the Pharisees took offense when they heard what you said?" He answered, "Every plant that my heavenly Father has not planted will be uprooted. Let them alone. They are blind guides of the blind. And if one blind person guides another, both will fall into the pit." But Peter said to him, "Explain this parable to us." Then he said, "Are you still without understanding? Do you not see that whatever goes into the mouth enters the stomach and goes out into the sewer? But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this is what defiles. For out of the heart come evil intentions, murder, adultery, fornication, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile." Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. Just then, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." But he did not answer her at all. And his disciples came and urged him, saying, "Send her away, for she keeps shouting after us." He answered, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." But she came and knelt before him, saying, "Lord, help me." He answered, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." And she said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed instantly. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Excuse me for a minute. It's a little warm up here, so I open the door. Hope you don't mind. When I was out in Los Angeles, California, and it was growing time closer and closer to Christmas, I was having a bit of a problem getting into the Christmas spirit. It was usually 80, 75 degrees. Sometimes it would dip down to 60. And I mentioned this to some people one time, and they said, "Well, this is just like it would have been for Jesus." And I said, "How can you say that?" And he said, "Well, the weather is the same. The climate is the same." I have always remembered that every year I get around to Christmas, because what I realized was my context of understanding what Christmas is was that there might be a glimpse of snow with Christmas. And they had no idea what I was talking about. I realized that my context of how I thought about Christmas included robes on because it would be cold and, several layers. And they had no idea what I was talking about. Context affects the way we experience the world and therefore the way we understand things. Sometimes it's hard for us to understand why somebody else thinks and does the way that they do, but we don't necessarily think about their context in life. We're thinking out of our context. Well, so I believe it was with the disciples and the Pharisees. Their context, from what happens at the beginning of this text, is that who they are as religious and holy people depends entirely upon the way they live their daily lives. And the way they live those daily lives is dependent upon the laws that have been handed down for centuries and centuries. One of those laws has to do with the fact that no one is to eat until they have washed their hands. There are other religions that have some of the same kind of beliefs in that you wash your hands before you pray. In this religion, it was you wash your hands before you eat. Well, evidently, Jesus and the disciples aren't close to any water. And they begin to eat without washing their hands. And so the Pharisees are upset about that because it is a holy rule that you do this. So here's where we enter today in this text. Jesus and they are having this discussion about the fact that it's not necessary to wash your hands. In fact, it's not whether your hands are clean that defiles the body, but instead, it is what comes out of the mouth. Because what comes out of the mouth comes out of the heart. And the heart is that which we need to pay attention to make sure that it is formed and shaped in the things that would not defile us. The context makes a difference in how people understand what's happening. Now, everyone had been confused, and Jesus is trying to explain it to all of them and trying to help his disciples transition into a new way of thinking. And he's just talked about the fact of what comes out of your mouth is what can defile a person, and what happens next. It's all put to a test. Just as Jesus has ended this whole discourse on what defiles a person, the next challenge steps forward. It's a Canaanite woman. A woman from another race, from another religious group. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. And not only is she just happens to be there, she begins shouting at them, "Have mercy on me. Lord, Son of David, my daughter is tormented by a demon." The interesting thing is, she uses their language of the Jewish faith. Have mercy on me. Like our Kyrie, whenever we use it. Lord, have mercy on me. It's a part of the tradition. Now let me just remind you one more time. What is it that Jesus has just said? What comes out of a person's mouth is what defiles them. And what do the disciples say? Send her away, for she keeps shouting at us. And the next dialogue that happens is absolutely amazing. I don't care how you look at it. In fact, I probably looked at 5 different commentators, biblical students, and I had 5 different interpretations of what happens next. However you might try to explain away why Jesus said what he said, why the disciples said what they said, it doesn't make any difference, because here's what happens. The woman is surrounded by men of another religion, and she never backs down. We may not like that, but that is the reality of what happens in this text. She's not named, for that would personalize her. Instead, she's insulted within the metaphor that Jesus uses. He says with her and her sick daughter are likened to a dog. But she takes that label and pushes it even further with Jesus. She doesn't back down. She persists for his attention, for his ministry. I don't know that I could do that. How could anyone persist in such a situation? She's surrounded by people who despise her, who demand that she be sent away. She's insulted by the very one that she begs for mercy. And she even takes a chance to have a little bit of a discussion there, a theological debate. I think the Jewish word there would be, she has some chutzpah, a lot more than I have. Where does she get that strength? Where does she find the power to face that kind of hostility? I think it was in this past week, Paul and I were watching PBS one night. And on the show, they're in the raising money type thing, so they have some special people performing. And a name you might recognize was in there doing a presentation. Do you recognize the name Yakov Smirnoff? Yeah, Yakov has had a place down in Branson for years. He's a comedian. That's how we've known him, from Russia. Well, Yakov has gone to the University of Pennsylvania, I believe, and got a master's degree. And master's degree is kind of in the theory of love and relationships, or how you build healthier, better relationships, understanding kind of the psychology of people. And I think right now he's working on his PhD, I can't remember where, but he's actually teaching now at the Missouri State University in Springfield. That's our Yakov Smirnoff. Well, this presentation was called Marriage Happily Ever Laughter. So yes, he was trying to talk about the fact that in a marriage, you can gauge how well your marriage is by how much laughter you share in your marriage. And so he went through some different ways of talking about that. But one of the ways he connected in, and that kind of connected with me with this text, he began by talking about that it happens with a woman as they go through preparing to have a child, that there is a neurological thing that happens in the brain. And the neurological thing that happens is that place in the brain is stimulated, and it fills the woman with an overwhelming love, fierce protectiveness, and constant worry. Does that ring a bell with anybody? And what he went on to say is that indeed in a relationship, when there is a loving relationship, those same things will happen in both people, and the neurological happening within the brain. I kept thinking about this week, and in fact, Paul and I talked about this for a moment, and we probably had heard that before. But it helped me to maybe understand a little bit better how this Canaanite woman could step forward in such a hostile environment for the sake of her child. She will not quit. She will not give up. She will not take no for an answer until she has been heard by the one that she believes can fill her and her child with this mercy, and in this case, with this healing. When she meets Jesus with the same fierce love, Jesus responds and reaches back with that same fierce love. Oftentimes we talk about God as creator, God as parent. If we can understand that neurologically this happens among us, how can we not say that that also happens with our God who created us? Our God who created us loves us fiercely and reaches out to protect us daily. It does not mean that we will always feel warm and fuzzy, and it doesn't always mean that we will feel safe necessarily. But that love keeps coming to us. And that love is something that we know that keeps us able to keep stepping up and demanding what we need to have to protect life, so that we can continue to step up and demand what is right. Love is about speaking with a right heart. Remember what it said in our text? a heart without evil intentions, a heart without the thoughts of murder, adultery, fornication, theft, false witness, and slander. Some of those sometimes are easier to feel in the midst of challenge. Because loving is not easy, and you've probably had that experience even with your own family, that sometimes loving is not easy. It's not child's play. It's hard work. It's stepping up at times when doesn't feel safe. It's stepping up in the face of hatred, stepping up in the face of adversity, stepping up and confronting our own biases and hatred. As we have seen in this past week, being the Canaanite woman is not easy. Loving can sometimes mean more confrontation. But Jesus steps into that hate. Jesus steps into that violence and calls us to be faithful to the one God who chooses to fiercely love all of God's children. Amen.